Rutgers University. And I'd like to welcome you to the School of Arts and Sciences Scarlet Speakers Series. This series of events offers Rutgers alumni and friends the opportunity to stay connected and to hear from faculty members and alumni from across the university. So I've been told it's 80 degrees in Florida today, and part of me is quite envious. And so while I wish we were in sunny Florida hosting this event in person, I'm so happy we're able to have alumni and friends from all over the country join us for today's event. And the event being the business of sports and entertainment in Florida. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Myron Mike Finkelstein, the founder and executive director of Rutgers University Global Sports Business Master of Science program. Mike takes on the role after a stellar 22-year career in advertising, marketing, and client acquisition, and 20 years as a faculty member, mentor, and senior advisor for strategic partnerships here at Rutgers University in the undergraduate sports management program. In addition to teaching both sports marketing and management, which saw him honored as a finalist for Rutgers Teacher of the Year in 2014, and his innovative leadership in the Rutgers undergraduate program, Mike has a long list of successes in both business and academia. So without further ado, Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Dean Marsh. I appreciate that. As we start, I'd like to remind everybody that we've muted your microphones, and so there won't be any background noise during the presentation. But the event is also being recorded and it's stored online for your viewing of the event. And if you have friends or family who you think would enjoy today's talk, please forward them the video, and we will send out a link later today for you as well. So I'm extremely honored to moderate this panel. We have two guests who are just world leaders in the sports business industry, and they happen to be your Florida alumni members as well. We have with us today Judge Michael Chavies, pardon me. And Michael has had a prolific career as a trial lawyer in South Florida, as well as 13 years on the civil court bench, and has tried cases literally in every courtroom in the state and the federal court system in Florida particularly. Judge Chavies was recognized by Law 360 as one of its minority power brokers for a series of his leadership and influence on the legal community. And Michael focuses on mentorship and professional development programs aiming at minorities that will help them advance their legal careers. With particular relevance to today, in the community, Michael has recently served as this year's chair of the College Football Playoff Championship game, and has been a longtime member of the Orange Bowl Board of Directors, where he was previously also the president and a chair, and continues to be a board member to this day. And we'll come to that during our conversation today. And we've also got Miles Pistorius with us today, who is a senior vice president and the general counsel of the Miami Dolphins and the Hard Rock Stadium, where both of those events took place this year. And Miles is responsible for the oversight of all legal matters related to the Miami Dolphins and the Hard Rock Stadium, literally including sponsorship agreements and broadcast and digital media rights, suite and club seat licensing and related ticket arrangements, live entertainment events, talent agreements, intellectual property, and as we learned in our pre-mediation conversation, the infectious disease officer as well, which has really put on quite an added burden and interesting twist to the traditional day's job. Since joining the Dolphins, Michael represented the franchise and the stadium on the Hard Rock Stadium naming rights deal, as well as being involved in the Miami's hosting of the Super Bowl in 2020. And as I just mentioned, the college football playoff successful championship that just took place on the 11th. Miles previously was with the NBA for 15 years as well, and is, of course, as is Judge Chavies, a Rutgers alumni. We were intending to have our third panelist, Cassie McBride, join us, and because of some personal health issues, she was unfortunately unable to join us, but hopefully she'll be able to attend in future conversations. She, for your information, was the youngest woman to become a general counsel for a NFL team when she joined the Tampa Bay Bucks at the age of 26. And over the last 4 years, she has been with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So unfortunately, we send Cassie our very best and hope she has a speedy recovery, and look forward to having her with us in the future. So now to the meat of the meeting today, our lunch. I always like to, in my classes, distinguish what we talk about as fans and learn what really happens under the tip of the iceberg in the business of sports. And I've been privileged to have a few conversations with Michael and Miles prior to today's luncheon. And I think our direction has been focused on the world that the pandemic has thrown at us. Possibly, Michael, I'd like to start with you, and we want to explore the implications that you had to face, particularly, this year was the 87th event of the Orange Bowl, and the 7th college football playoff, both at Hard Rock Stadium, and literally one on January 2nd, immediately followed by the playoffs on the 11th. So I know that you were faced with extraordinary implications as a result of COVID. Would you like to just discuss that a little bit, and I'll follow up.
First of all, thank you, Mike, for that introduction, and thanks to Dean March as well. And hello to everybody out there. It's good to be with you today. Wish we could be with you in person, as was mentioned before, but I guess it's the second best. Mike, I think the key date for me was March 4th. I was actually sitting at the Orange Bowl offices, and we were planning our championship game, planning our next host committee meeting, when I got an email from my law office and said that the offices were going to be closed that night, which was a shocker to me. I mean, I knew the pandemic was out there, but when you see it, it really resonates with you. And we began thinking right then and there about our game. Would it be played? Would there be college football in 2020? And what changes would have to be made due to the fact that COVID was here and present. So one of the things that we started to think about right away was how we could reimagine some of our community events, some of the events that would be a part of the college football championship week. And most of you know, but many of you may not know, that this is the college football championship has become a mini Super Bowl. Not as big as that event that Miles and his folks put on last year, the Super Bowl, or the one that you saw on Sunday, but it's a huge, huge undertaking with musical events, fan fests, kid-related events, and we were planning for all of that, and all of that in a traditional way. We were also planning for a full stadium. Every college football championship game since 2015, when the CFP began, was a full stadium event. So we had to, over the months, start to think about how we could reconfigure that as well. So we were affected with regard to many of the way we did live events. We couldn't do them live. We had to do them remote. And I might talk about how there was one event in particular where we actually benefited from that, mics. So that was an interesting consequence of COVID. But everything related to the game had to be thought out, reconfigured, restructured. And we can talk about that more specifically later, but it was a huge undertaking. Budgetary concerns. We had to reconfigure our budget. We're working with the CFP. This is actually their game, and we're hosting their game. So those budgetary conversations and concerns had to be had with them. So a lot of meetings that we didn't think we were going to have, we did have with them. One real big positive I'll mention, then I'll stop and we can move on, is that despite all of this, we were able to give back $4.5 million to the Tri-County community, Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade. And that pretty much was what we expected to do. So we met that goal. And that was due to the real hard work of a lot of people on the host committee, and a lot of people in the Tri-County community. So I'm very proud of that. And we can talk about that a little bit later too.
Thank you, Michael. That leads me to a twofold question for you, Miles. So being the principal of the Hard Rock Stadium and having these enormous events back to back, similarly, you had to face unbelievable budget restrictions and a reorientation of delivery. I know that you too, as well as owner Steve Ross, were extremely focused on the community relations aspect. So maybe you could just touch on those two things and then we'll develop that a little bit.
Yeah, the last major event before the world shut down last year was the Super Bowl here at Hard Rock Stadium. Yeah. And it was on March 13th, shortly after that we shut down our offices, and we haven't really reopened. The leadership team and some essential staff comes back, and I've been here, but we're still open for business per se, for staff. I think when the pandemic started and we all went home, Stephen Ross, the team owner, and my CEO, Tom Garfield, they challenged us. They said, hey, the season's coming up. This looks like it's going to be here a while. Why don't we, get innovative and creative here and try to figure out what we're going to do when the season starts. So we spent most of April and May trying to come up with some scenario that allowed for fans, because at that point, the NBA had shut down its season and indefinitely. The NHL, baseball hadn't, they postponed their opening day. And, our thinking was there has to be something in between no fans and full fans. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what that would look like following CDC guidance. And one of the first things we did was we talked to this bio reference GBAC, Global Bio Advisory Council, Biorisk Advisory Council, and we wanted to get a third-party certification from an organization that was independent and was able to sort of certify the hygiene practices and the cleanliness of our venue, because I think the first thing we needed to do was to give fans comfort. So with that, we announced that probably in May last year that we got that certification. We were the first stadium in the world to get it, and a lot of venues followed suit through GBAC and some other certifying organizations. But then from there, we wanted to establish our rules. Like, what are we going to be? Are we going to be full fans, half fans? And we looked at the math, and with social distancing and the CDC requirements, we figured out we could be at about 20%. So then we went to our fans, gave them the option to roll over to next year if they weren't comfortable, and or to attend games in a socially distant environment. And we had a lot of takers, and we were able to essentially sell out our available capacity for the year for the Dolphins. And the NFL took note of what we were trying to do, and then they came up with their rules over the summer, which largely mimicked ours, and they added a few more, like wearing masks in seats, which weren't a part of our original plan. And we were off and running with our tickets, our season ticket holders, in August. And then, we were also challenged with trying to use our venue in different ways. So we ended up creating a drive-in theater where people could literally come into the stadium and watch movies from their car. And we also had a walk-up portion to that in a socially distant manner. And that was a very popular thing to do, because if you remember, everyone was dying to get out of the house and do things safely last summer. So, we partnered with these movie licensing companies and said, hey, we're going to do this. Can you give us a deal on the film rights? And, this ties into your last question, Mike, about charity. So one of the first things we did was, we wanted to give back to our community. The stadium's in Miami Gardens, which isn't the Miami you see on TV. And there was certainly needs early on from, job losses, because the tourism industry here just kind of went dark. And also, food insecurity. So we decided, Stephen Ross, that we were going to do address the food security issue. And so since early in the pandemic, we've been giving away 1,000 meals a day here at the stadium, to working with the local churches and community groups to identify those folks in need. And we're using not only Stephen's own and the Dolphins philanthropic donations, but also any revenue that we've derived from those outdoor movie theaters has gone towards food relief. And we're going to keep that going at least for a year, through the anniversary of COVID, which is March 13th of our shutdown. But we're probably going to go far beyond that and continue to service the community here as we try to work our way through this pandemic.
Yeah. Like other stadiums that we're familiar with up here, will Hard Rock become a site for vaccinations?
Yeah, so we already are a site for vaccinations, and from the beginning, we were a site for testing. So we've had a steady flow of traffic. In one parking lot, it's the meals; another parking lot, it's the testing; and the third parking lot now, it's the vaccines. So we're busy, and actually, all of those uses of the stadium keep people employed. So we have game day employees who are used to doing concerts and soccer games and festivals in the off season, and aren't getting that work. But because we're doing food relief and because we're doing testing, there is a need for traffic employees and food and beverage employees and in general game day staff. So that was another way we're able to sort of keep people working during the pandemic.
Yeah, wow, what an endeavor. Michael, similarly, I know that as you had said, over $4.5 million was raised to help the communities. And actually, people may not realize, but it isn't just the creation and delivery of the game, but I believe you said there are 3 tangential events that occur as well. Maybe you could tell us about that.
That's correct. I mean, one of our motivations with this game and one of the purposes that we wanted to serve was to contribute back to the community, much as the Dolphins and Miles did. We planned to do 3 big community-based events, one in Dade, one in Broward, one in Palm Beach County. They were going to be in parks, they were going to be live, a lot of people there. And of course, we were not able to do that based upon the circumstances. We weren't able to do it in the way that we first thought we would be, with people out of their cars and interacting with one another. But we did our events. We did an event in Dade County, which was a back-to-school themed event, and the turnout was tremendous. We handed out back-to-school supplies and handed out food to folks in a community, the same community actually that Miles mentioned, Miami Gardens. They couldn't get out of their cars, but they drove through, popped their trunks, and we put food and back-to-school supplies in their trunks. Similarly, in Palm Beach County, last October, we had a Halloween themed event and pretty much ran the same way. We gave out food. We gave out Halloween goodies, and that reached thousands and thousands of people in Palm Beach County. And then in Broward County, just before Thanksgiving, we did a Thanksgiving themed event, and again gave out food to people in that community, and also other goodies to them as well. All in all, that reached a large number of people in those communities, people who otherwise would not have had that food, would not have had that experience. So weren't able to do it, Mike, the way we wanted to do it, but we did it, and we pulled it off. You mentioned the 4.5 million. We engaged in a project with the foundation end and side of the CFP, the Extra Yard for Teachers program, where we've now renovated 17 schools in Dade, Palm Beach, and Broward counties, renovated their learning centers, their innovative learning centers. Totally tore them down, put in new furniture, and put in all the modern technology that they will require. That number is going to be 24 when we finish. So real proud of that, and accomplish that purpose as well. And then we're talking about, and we'll complete another what's called a legacy park renovation project. We've done about 4 of those already through Orange Bowl, and this will be the first through the championship game in conjunction with Orange Bowl. So all in all, again, around 4.5 million that we have put back in the community through communities through the championship game efforts. And that's just about the figure that we thought we would do. So despite the odds, despite COVID, we did accomplish that purpose, again, based upon the hard work of a lot of good people in our communities.
Yeah, that's magnificent. 24 communities has to just be an enormous segment of the population that you serve, and you know, taking national events and giving back locally is something that people don't really see, you know, as we act as fans watching an individual event. How about the switch and the quick turnaround from January 2nd Orange Bowl to January 11th championship game?
Is that for?
That's for you, Michael.
You know, because
follow up, please.
I was so busy with my championship game on January 11th, you know, I wasn't as involved in Orange Bowl as past years.
Yeah.
But I give a lot of credit to those persons, staff persons who worked on both Orange Bowl and on championship game. And some of the people were the same personalities to be able to turn it over in such a short period of time, especially under these circumstances. I give a big shout out to the Dolphins and Miles, and, you know, for the way that they had that stadium prepared for both games. I mean, I felt as safe as I could possibly feel going into the stadium on both occasions. I know the other people that I spoke to felt the same way. I mean, they really had it down to a science, and they were strict about compliance with all the rules and the regulations. And for the most part, from what I could see, Miles, everybody followed those restrictions. So from what I could see, everything worked out really well. I haven't heard anything negative about it. And in a very short period of time, we put on 2 big games. People talk about numbers. We're certainly disappointed we couldn't have full stadiums. But if you think about it, if we put about 15 in for the Orange Bowl and another 15 or so for the championship game, that's 30,000 people within a short period of time. And not a lot of locations would have been able to do that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Miles, could we
we're-
follow up on that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're used to fast turnarounds here at the stadium because we also host the Miami Hurricanes home games. So we have many weekends during the season where there's back-to-back Hurricanes on Saturday and Dolphins on Sunday. So our stadium crew is pretty used to that. And the Dolphin season this year was a learning experience with the COVID protocols, and the fans were very cooperative. We banned tailgating because we figured that even if we got everything right in the building, if the parking lot was a party scene, that probably wasn't a good idea. The Hurricanes actually went even further and didn't even allow students to attend their games this year. They allowed their alumni and other fans because they wanted to keep their students safe. So, you know, all of our event promoters and partners have different wrinkles to the protocols, but the Dolphins protocols were the baseline. And and the other events were able to sort of modify from there. But everyone was cooperative. All the feedback is that everyone has felt safe. We didn't have any. The NFL has had a program where we had to trace sort of upticks in COVID in the community following events to see if there was any link between hosting our events and the number spiking, and there was no correlation. So I think what we set out to do, we accomplished in that we held events safely, and they didn't become super spreader events.
You have to say that although it's a magnificent feat in its own right to transfer from Hurricanes football to Dolphins football on a given weekend, with the two events here having massive fan bases coming from, in this case, Texas and North Carolina for the Orange Bowl, and Alabama and Ohio for the championship game. That must have also presented unique challenges.
Yeah, I think the protocols in their home states were probably not as strict as ours, and they probably weren't used to that at their regular season games, but they were more than respectful and cooperative, and there were no incidents at all. But it did take some getting used to, and to the CFP host committee's credit, and the CFP management, they were very good at communicating in advance what to expect here, both to the teams and to their fan bases. So there weren't any surprises. I think the key there was the constant and early communication.
Were there nuances that you needed to face that are league oriented versus team oriented? And that really reverts back to the general Dolphins and stadium as opposed to the championship games. Michael, you might look at that from the CFP perspective as opposed to the stadium perspective as well. Miles, would you lead us on that?
Yeah, I think for us, the league was the baseline, and what they said was you have to be compliant with CDC guidelines, the 6 feet of distance and the mask wearing, or your stadium or your state's rules, whichever were stricter. So we couldn't, even though Florida, I think for better or for worse, has been, pretty aggressive about reopening the economy. I think the NFL never wanted us to go sort of more liberal than what the CDC was requiring. And I think that was wise for football, because at the end of the day, it was about protecting the fans and protecting the players. And sure, we probably could have had 65,000 in the building for the college football championship, and it might have been okay, but I don't think anyone here was comfortable with that risk. And certainly in terms of the Dolphins, the primary goal was to have our 8 regular season games actually be played, and that the having fans in the building was really a bonus in this environment.
Michael, did you? Yes.
One of the interesting aspects here, Mike, was that we had 2 conferences, and each conference had their testing procedures with regard to the players that had to be adhered to and followed, and those testing procedures went all the way through up until 2 days before the game. So we didn't even know if we were going to have a game until 2 days before. We needed to make sure that all of the players, the requisite number of players, tested negative. So we were a little bit on pins and needles there for a while. There were some rumors that were about that there might not, in fact, be a game because some of the players had tested positive. But at the end of the day, when just those 2 days before the actual kickoff of the game, everybody came through and tested within the requisite numbers, and we played the game. But that's another situation that we were very much aware of, very much monitoring, and very much concerned about to the last minute.
It's fascinating. You both mentioned how you needed to reconfigure your budgets. How did that affect you first, Michael?
Well, we had a budget based upon the game that we bid for and the numbers that we thought we would spend, and the revenue that we thought we would take in. And of course, all that changed when it was found out that we wouldn't be able to put on that game. We wouldn't be able to put the same number of fans in the stands. We wouldn't be able to hold some of our private events, like we had a concert that we were going to put on, and some other pregame events that were revenue generating events that just couldn't happen based on the circumstances. So all of that had to be reconfigured. We had to engage in conferences, discussions with CFP on a weekly basis, maybe more than a weekly basis, to really take a look at what those expenses were going to look like, what our revenues, how our revenues were going to be impacted. So we totally revamped the budget. I mean, with thanks to the CFP, really great partners. They understood. They worked with us. We worked hard. Good people on our side, and I think we got to a place where we wanted to land. But it took a lot of hard work. So that was, it was a difficult process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Miles, how about you? I have a follow-up question based on the finances, but in general, your reconfiguration entailed.
Right. So yeah, first on the expense side, just getting the building ready and being compliant with CDC and NFL guidelines, from signage to touchless metal detectors, which we invested in, to hand sanitizer, which everyone knows was almost impossible to get early on. All the seat covers that we had to do to cover, to have our 6 feet the distance between each pod. You're talking about plexiglass between media seats. You're talking about millions of dollars of just prep costs to get the stadium to where it needed to be. And then on the revenue side, I mean, it's pretty easy math. We had 20% capacity, so you're losing 80% of ticket revenue, and then you have to work with your sponsors to see if they're entitled to what we call make goods or substitute benefits under their contracts if we were unable to deliver anything that under the contract. So we spent a lot of time in the off season looking at all of our deals with our sponsors to see if there was a make good obligation or if we just wanted to do it to be good partners. So we got creative and had a lot of individual conversations with our partners to get them the comfort and the sort of equitable adjustment that they were looking for. So yeah, I think across the board, sponsorship, tickets, those are our big local revenue sources. Obviously, they were impacted, and we're hopeful that next year we'll be back to something close to full capacity and being able to take care of our sponsors. But this year was definitely a challenge. At the league level, the television revenue sort of drives the bus here, and getting those games on television was key, and ultimately pays for the player costs at the end of the day. So I think, and you saw that in the other leagues, getting the games played was the most important to get that to keep the media revenue in place.
To follow up on that a little more, obviously in negotiations for licenses and sponsorship agreements, there are many different approaches. I know that most of these agreements are anywhere from 30 to 130 pages based on the partner. And some people are, not very convivial all the time. They just say, this is the way it is, and this is the way we're going to do it. And of course, most people, appreciate the fact that you're alluding to, that a great deal of conciliation has to occur between the expected result and the reality of what has transpired. Do you find that's an enormous challenge for you with your individual partners? You and I also discussed additionally the implications for those people who are national, regional, and local sponsors or licensees, because attendance versus media is a huge factor. Maybe you could address that.
Yeah, so I would say we view our partners truly as partners, and we wanted to have a discussion that just made sense, and I think everyone understood that we were in highly unusual times, and that the pain is going to have to be shared, right? And it was really just coming to something that was fair and equitable. To our partners' credit, I think everyone did it in good faith, and I think both sides were equally unhappy with where it ended up, which probably means we hit the mark. And then for the partners, a lot of the partner benefits are signage, in the building for games. So do you get an adjustment for that because it's less capacity? To me, it depends, because if your signage is on the outside of the building and we have food relief and vaccinations and testing, and you still get the foot traffic, are you still getting the benefit of your bargain? So that's sort of a subject of discussion. But then a lot of the benefits now are digital media through our social media apps, through our website. We were able to replace player appearances with virtual appearances. So in a lot of ways, technology allowed us to overcome some of those obstacles. Even in the building with cashless transactions, we converted in the off season. Technology saved the day. We were able to, deliver food, order, pay for, and deliver food and beverages and merchandise without anyone ever having to be within 6 feet of each other. So I think in a lot of ways, both on the partner side and on the vendor side, we were able to benefit from and leverage the technology.
Yeah. Michael, how did that affect your approach with your sponsors as well for arguably both games, but particularly the national championship?
It's a very interesting question, very good question, Mike. Fortunately, we were able to nail down a lot of support, both public and private, prior to that March 5th date that I alluded to before, prior to things starting to change because of COVID. So our challenge after March 5th, as we moved along, was to maintain those commitments, to make sure that everybody was comfortable and satisfied that although we couldn't put on the game that we had first talked about putting on, but that we're going to put on a really great game anyway and do the best we could under the circumstances.
Yeah.
Fortunately, our private partners stuck with us, our public partners stuck with us. And I think a lot of the motivation for them was the fact that we were doing so much in the community. They understood that, they realized it, they knew there was a need, and they respected the fact that they were doing that we were doing that. So we were able to maintain those commitments from both our public and private partners. On a personal note, I feel a little sorry for Miami Beach, the city of Miami Beach, because so much of this effort was going to take place there. We're going to have 3 concerts out there. We're going to have a fan fest that was going to be like no other fan fest, and a lot of other active activities were going to take place on Miami Beach, and we weren't able to do them that way. We had to do a lot of it virtual. We had to pull some of the stuff, but again, to their credit, they stuck with us too. I can't say enough about both the public and private partners who participated, who believed in us, and who maintained their commitment to us.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of work.
Yeah, an enormous group effort, and obviously throughout the whole year, and for these events that are highlighted, hospitality and tourism has to have suffered enormously. So it's a credit to you all that you were able to, find a happy medium. I have a couple of questions from our audience, but I just wanted to do a follow-up question, Miles, particularly as we discuss the relationship between the professional sport organization and its natural business clients, business to business. There's also the relationship between teams and the Dolphins with their players. And one of the big implications of the implications of this last year has been the salary cap. Many people don't realize, I think, that the salary cap is based on the revenue of the previous year. So as a similar negotiation with your sponsors and licensing agreements, how's it going with the players union?
So the collective bargaining agreement is between the players union and the league. So we don't have direct involvement in those negotiations, but I can tell you what I know. And actually, I've seen both sides of this. So back when I was at the NBA, I was at the league office, and we did a huge new media deal, and it actually ended up creating a spike in the cap. And at the time, the league thought it would be better to sort of stagger the increases so that not one class of free agents would benefit from this windfall. And so I think it was proposed to the union that we smooth out the increases, and they were, said, no, thanks, we'll take our money now. So now we're on the other side where this year's after each fiscal year, we do an audit and to figure out what the revenue is, and then the cap is calculated based on that. We all know and expect it to be substantially lower than projected and substantially lower than it was last year. So it does make it difficult for when you're planning contracts and salaries. Every year the salary cap has increased. So now to all of a sudden have a cliff would mess up a lot of teams in their planning for their player contracts. So I think, to the union's credit and to the league office's credit, they did negotiate already a floor, so the cap won't fall below a certain floor, and they're still trying to sort of arrive on the exact number. I think basically they agreed that a cliff, a drastic decrease in the cap is not good for anyone, clubs and players alike. So they are working to sort of smooth out that hit, so that the team planning and roster planning isn't too badly impacted. So it's interesting. I think the negotiations are still going. Another sort of good factor, we lucked out, I think, in the NFL, both on the calendar because of when COVID hit. So, some leagues, as you've seen, are being impacted in 2 seasons. It looks like we'll probably only be impacted by 1, knock on wood. So there was some luck there, but another sort of lucky happenstance was that right before the sports world shut down, we finished and ratified our new labor agreement with our players. And I got to say that if that didn't happen, that negotiation probably would have been much different now. And I think everyone on both sides is happy that we got a deal done before the pandemic really took its toll.
People probably don't realize, but I believe you mentioned earlier that there was a 75% drop in revenue throughout the league this past year. So these negotiations that you've mentioned are enormous, and the implications could have been drastic, and it seems like cool heads are prevailing. So that's very admirable.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
the long view of this, right? This is, yes, it's a once in a century pandemic, but our relationship with our players, who are truly our partners here, is key to the long-term growth of the league. So for people to dig in over this pandemic would not only not be a good look, it just wouldn't be good for the long-term business prospects. So I think cooler heads prevailed because that was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Dean Marsh has sent a terrific question and suggests that sports has been ahead of universities in handling large facilities and crowds generally. So, Michael, how about you tell us if you have any insights to share as Rutgers plans to open up for next fall semester?
I just think you have to be as careful, as circumspect as you possibly can be. I think the Big Ten story was a particularly interesting story and an experience that we can all learn from. At one point we weren't going to play football, in the Big Ten, and then we were going to play football, and there was a lot of debate among and between presidents and conference heads, and there have been a lot of articles, I guess people have read about that. And I think the Big Ten was the most interesting experience. But I think what came out of that more than anything else Mike and Dean March, is that people were paying attention and they were being careful. And the university presidents in the Big Ten will really make that decision. I mean, they were using every resource available to them to do the right thing for the student athletes and the community. So we're not through this thing yet. Everybody knows that. I mean, all you have to do is turn on the television, any channel, or pick up a newspaper, and you'll see that we're not through it. So we need to continue to pay attention to what's going on out there.
Miles, any follow-up insight?
Yeah, this is going to sound radical, but my advice would be follow the science. I think we tested our players and our football staff every single day of the season, and it produced a ton of data. Last month, a study came out jointly with the CDC based on the NFL data, and they found some things during the season that changed the CDC guidance to the country. They found that eating meals together was probably not a good idea. They found that it doesn't necessarily have to be 15 minutes of contact in order to spread the virus. They said riding in cars was really dangerous. So we discovered this from the contact tracing and the testing of our players over the season. I don't know if you remember, but at some point in October, that a bunch of teams got hit pretty hard at Tennessee, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, some others. And some of the findings coming out of that has both influenced CDC guidance generally, but also we were able to adjust and essentially save our season and change our protocols on the fly in order to stop the spike in the positivity rates. And I think following the science, following the data is the key to all of this and to reopening. And I think the NFL and these clubs are just a microcosm of what needs to be done on a larger scale.
Understood. That's great. I have an interesting question as well from one of our audience participants. And that is based on, let me just check this here. I'm sorry. Oops. Bear with me. I'm sorry. What has to happen to ensure an equitable hiring pipeline for the next generation of talented and unrepresented groups in sports business? Michael, would you like to?
That's a great question.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So whoever asked that question, congratulations. I mean,
Harry Swain.
in my role as president of Orange Bowl and leading up to the presidency, and my travels around the United States on college campuses, into conference meetings and sites, everything that I've done with CFP and in this endeavor, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's no question that minorities are underrepresented in this business. I've talked to some athletic directors about it and suggested that there be programs for student athletes, minority student athletes, to get them ready to go into the sports business once they graduate from college or professional school. I mean, everybody's not going to be playing on Sunday or Major League Baseball or basketball player. It's not going to happen. So there needs to be some mechanism, some vehicle by which they could be ready to assume these positions. These are good jobs. This is a business that they know better than anybody. So why aren't minorities better represented in these areas? So I think that's a conversation that has to continue, Mike. It's an important conversation, and we need to live up to our responsibility.
Just for adding my 2 cents to that, I think our particular Rutgers group here today should know, as you probably do, that Rutgers is the most diverse university in the United States, hence the world. I'm very proud to tell you that our master's program is extraordinarily diverse, both ethnically and gender-wise, and we literally look for that in the quality of character of people of all walks of life in producing what we believe will be the next wave of executives, in the sport business industry. So we're very, very attentive to that. Rutgers is very dedicated to that as well. So you should all be extremely proud of our relationship with the university. Miles, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just think, we have to make the case, and it's true, and all of the data supports it. Diversity is just good business. We're an increasingly diverse country, and our fan base is increasing. So it would just make sense that leadership, both on the field and in the business, should also be diverse and reflect its fan base and its population. That's not rocket science. So, we have to get beyond sort of just diversity and inclusion and get into, equity and parity. And that's about being intentional. That's about being objective in this criteria for promotion. It's about creating a process that allows assistant coaches to get the attention and the looks that they need to. Eric Bieniemy and so the two coordinators for the Super Bowl champions are both African American, plus the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. And I think part of the challenge is they're kind of victims of their own success, and the NFL has addressed this somewhat, but I don't personally think it's gone far enough. Their ability to interview during the playoffs is tough because their teams are still playing, right? So they're in some ways victims of their own success, and so we that needs to be addressed in a fuller way. We were able to overcome that when we hired Brian Flores a couple of years ago. He won the Super Bowl. The next day, he was named our head coach, and I think the NFL has given attention to that sort of process issue. But obviously, we have an African American head coach and an African American general manager, and I think we were the first team to have that. And so here, it's been purposeful and intentional, and I think we realized from the improving results on the field that it also made good business sense. And I think, like I said at the beginning, making the case that this is a business opportunity and not charity is key to getting full buy-in.
I have a question, I think, which is more directed to our younger audience today and students possibly. What advice might you give to those students who are interested in working towards a job in the front office, so to speak, at the leagues? Both of you could please give me your responses. Michael, would you like to start?
I guess on the college front, it's much of what I said before, Mike, and that is that let's be prepared first. Take those courses and which will place you in a position where you'll have the knowledge, you'll have the academic experience, make the relationships and associations with people who are already in those positions at your respective schools, and really get to know that business. There are jobs out there that are available and good jobs.
Yes.
If your interest is there, then you have to pursue it, both academically and otherwise. So I think that's the best advice I can give, to just prepare yourself and be ready and know what courses that you should take in order to get in a position to assume those jobs. But again, we have a responsibility on the other side as well to provide those jobs. And there are people out there, as Miles, who are qualified. Hire them. So it's a two-way street.
Yes.
But and both sides have to do their parts.
Yeah. Michael, would you like to? Miles, would you like to sum it up?
Yeah, I think the old saying, what happens when preparation meets opportunity, right? So when the opportunity arises, you need to be prepared, and it can't be something where it looks like you just decided that you wanted to be in sports. You have to be intentional about it. Like Michael said, take the right classes, develop the relationship, do the networking, show up at the conferences, because if you're prepared, people, when the opportunity comes, people will think of you, and and in that sense, you'll be creating your own luck.
I agree. Much of the principles that we are teaching in our program to that future group are based on really building up a network of connections, but more so to really understand what value can you add in the areas that you're particularly interested in. And then to prepare for that, look at the people like yourselves who have risen to the places these young students aspire to be in, see what steps they took, what you took, to get from their seat to your seat. What do you actually do in your seat? Because everybody's different. Some things will be appealing and others will resonate directly, and then oftentimes reach out to people like yourselves to find out what would you do differently if you were sitting in my seat today. But there's nothing more important than preparation, and having a definite chief aim in my mind is the key to pursuing your dream and the beliefs and circumstances that you would like to surround yourself with as you pursue your career and your life. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I know we had an hour. I think we've answered some of the questions coming in from the audience, and I just can't thank you two enough. I could talk to you all day and continue this conversation. And so I really appreciate you giving us your valuable time. This was very insightful, and I hope the audience learned a bit about what really happens, as I said, under the tip of the iceberg in the business of sports. It's really fascinating. So Michael and Miles, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope we have an opportunity to have a further conversation in the future. I'd also like to thank everybody in the audience for attending today. And you will be able to ask questions later. We will send you, in fact, a follow-up survey asking for your feedback. And as I said earlier, we'll also send you a link to this event. And so do feel free to share that with your friends, and anybody who wasn't able to join us today, we'd be happy to, have you respond to us. I'd like to also thank the people who put this event together for you, your alumni and events crew, starting with Dean Marsh and Gabrielle Wilders from the Dean's office. Really appreciate you joining us today. And Dana Ricci, Stephanie Fletcher, Christina Poggi, Christine Waite, and Samantha Barrett. You did a magnificent job in navigating this all for us and enabling this to happen. So there's a lot behind even a simple lunchtime meet, and we all couldn't be more appreciative for your efforts. Again, I thank you. I think our contact information is available to you, and I believe all of us would be happy to learn more about your feelings about the meeting and anything else that we can do to help you. And with that, I'd like to sign off and say thank you all very much for joining us today. Again, thank you, Miles and Michael, particularly. And we look forward to seeing you at the next speaker's event. So I'll say thank you and goodbye for today. Everybody be well and be safe, please.